Joining us tonight, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. Mr. Leader, thanks for being here.
Glad
Just
to be
in
here.
the past few minutes, Bernie Sanders put out a statement saying that a President Bernie Sanders would get Medicare for all through. He's pushing for filibuster reform, says it would get 51 votes. Democratic senators, quote, need to be prepared to do what polls show that rank-and-file Democrats want, and that is a Medicare for all single-payer system. Your reaction? Your reaction to that?
Not as long as I'm Majority Leader. It ought to be called Medicare for none. Because as the setup piece pointed out, 180 million Americans would lose the private health insurance many of them have negotiated for at work. Medicare itself, that current recipients have been paying into all these years, would be completely drained by adding all these additional people. If you want to turn America into a socialist country, this is the first step. That coupled, of course, with the Green New Deal, which would eliminate a whole lot of jobs. I think what we're seeing here is full socialism on display in the Democratic primaries for president. And even those who are skeptical about it, like Senator Klobuchar, are saying a public option. Well, that's not much different, because if you have a public option, I guarantee you the public option will also drive all the private insurance companies out of business. So look, this is a prescription for turning America into a Western European country.
Where's the GOP plan on health care?
Well, what we want to make sure everybody knows is that we're all in favor of covering pre-existing conditions, and that's really not endangered by the current litigation that's working its way through the courts. I'm all in favor of working on what should be called niche fixes to try to improve the current system. Obviously, Obamacare has entirely too high co-payments and deductibles. We ought to be working on something like that. There is a bipartisan effort underway in the Senate to try to get down the cost of prescription drugs. Those are the kinds of things that could actually pass. But I guarantee you, next year, what's going to be on display across this country is a debate about whether we want to turn America into a socialist country. Right. I never thought, by the way, that we'd be debating the virtues of capitalism in America in my lifetime.
You backed off last week, taking another run at trying to repeal and replace Obamacare. Did the president get too far over his skis there?
Well, look, we made that effort last Congress. It didn't work. Clearly, the Democratic House is not going to pass it. So we're not going to spend time in the Senate on things that have, literally no chance of becoming law.
What happens if the Supreme Court rules Obamacare unconstitutional?
Then we'll have to revisit the whole matter. And but that's not likely to happen anytime for the next couple of years. So I think people ought to just take a deep breath and settle down and let us work on some of these more modest fixes that I think the American people need and deserve.
You know that's not how the president talks about it. He says, get rid of Obamacare after the election now.
Well, after he and I had this discussion, he indicated he would come up with a plan and he'd run on it during the campaign. And if the Republicans were able to regain the House and hold the Senate, that would be a time for us to be voting on it. I
want to ask you, just since Senator Sanders talked about filibuster and filibuster reform, you've executed this maneuver to speed up the confirmation of many of the president's nominees. You're on the record saying there isn't an appetite to get rid of the legislative filibuster. But didn't that move kind of crack the door a little bit more, suggesting that maybe that is going to gain some strength with lawmakers, that the filibuster is not going to be around for long? Well,
look, this is a little bit down in the weeds for your viewers.
Trust me, they get it.
But the Senate's got two calendars, the executive calendar and the legislative calendar. We're in the personnel business. The House is not. Personnel, until Bush 43 was elected, was always handled in a fairly smooth way with a simple majority. Legislation is the essence of the Senate. It's always required a supermajority, and it has two good effects. It either kills bad stuff or it guarantees that both sides work out a compromise. That's the essence of the Senate. It's exactly what George Washington hoped the Senate would become, the place where things were slowed down, the place where things were thought over, and the place where a lot of bad ideas didn't become law.
So you're fighting Democrats here on the filibuster and maybe the White House too, right?
Well, the president was antsy about this. I told him we weren't going to do it, and we didn't. And I think now he's probably thinking I was right.
I want to get your thoughts on the testimony today from the Attorney General. He got a lot of attention. You heard earlier he was asked if there was spying on the Trump campaign. He said yes. Here's how some top Democrats reacted to that.
Republican conspiracy theory nonsense. It's a shell game. Look at this imaginary conspiracy versus the fact that the Russians interfered with our elections.
I'm very concerned about the statements made by Attorney General Barr. I think that they undermine our Constitution. They undermine the role of the Attorney General. I don't trust Barr. I trust Mueller. Okay.
What's your reaction to that?
Well, it's obviously a question of whether you trust Bill Barr or not. He was confirmed unanimously as Attorney General way back in Bush 41. He's an honorable man. He's not over there trying to cover anything up. He's going to send us a Mueller report that is as open as possible. And when I say as possible, I'm pretty confident he's not going to throw innocent people who weren't charged under the bus and ruin their reputation or reveal classified information. And if you send that up to the Hill, I guarantee you it'll get out.
Well, what about the part about the early part of the investigation? Are you confident Barr and or a Senate committee is going to get to the bottom of the beginning?
I'm pretty sure there was already an Inspector General in the Justice Department looking at that particular problem. That was related to the deputy in the FBI who was dismissed. It's worth a look, and I think the Inspector General in the Justice Department is already looking at that, and I think the Attorney General is within his right to do that.
The President said today it was an attempted coup, an illegal takedown of a president, and treason. You agree with him?
Look, I think the Mueller report is something the President ought to be happy about. He basically said what the President was hoping to hear. And I think once it's revealed, as much of it as it can legally be revealed, the President should be applauding it.
Senate watchers, there are a lot of them, say your agenda in the Senate is pretty limited, restricted mostly to confirming nominees. Not robust. Fair?
Well, that's partially true because the Democratic House is not likely to take up our best ideas, and we're not likely to take up theirs. On the other hand, personnel is important. 2 Supreme Court justices, 30 circuit court judges, the most in the first 2 years of any administration in history. We've done 7 more circuits now. That's 37. We have 53 district judges backed up. These are lifetime appointments that are going to make a huge impact on the country in the future. Now that we've modified the rules in a way that will allow us to expedite these appointments. We're going to do all of the district judges. That's not unimportant. That's going to have the longest impact on the country of anything we do. Legislatively,
one of the few things you've had major votes on, and you mentioned it, is to criticize Democrats. You got to vote on the Green New Deal, just to put Democratic, really presidential hopefuls in the Senate on the record. You decried what you called show votes during the government shutdown. How was that not a show vote?
Well, it was, but, you know, I don't intend to spend all of our time doing that sort of thing, but once in a while people ought to go on record and decide whether they're willing to vote for what they say they're for. I mean, when we had the Green New Deal vote in the Senate, only 4 Democrats voted against it. The rest of them voted present, including people who co-sponsored it. I think we should assume that all the rest of them are actually in favor of this job-killing proposal.
Do you think Congress should do anything to fight climate change?
Yeah, I believe that climate change is certainly happening. I think it ought to be addressed by technology and not by having the government shut down our economy and cause us to lose an incredible number of jobs.
Speaking about shutdowns, will there be another shutdown in the fall?
No.
Why?
Because it's not a sensible thing to do, and I don't believe we'll do that again. We do need, by the way, in order to avoid that, I've spoken with both the Speaker and the President within the last few days. We have convened a discussion at the staff level to see if we can agree on how much to spend this year and next year to avoid just that kind of thing.
The Democrats pulled off their budget vote the other day. What's your relationship with Nancy Pelosi? Can you characterize it?
Well, I like Nancy. I mean, we've known each other for years, so there's no personal animosity. We have very different views, but the American people have given us divided government. And in order for the government to function, we have to be able to discuss these things with each other. And we're going to do that with the administration on this issue of how much we're going to spend this year and next year.
Is there anything, we're heading into this election season, we're always one election away from solving big things, it seems. Is there any chance of bipartisan deals on drug prices?
Possibly.
Infrastructure?
if we can deal with how to pay for it. We've all been talking about infrastructure, including the president, for a couple of years now. If you want to do a really significant, large infrastructure bill, we need to have a lot of straight talk from everybody on both sides about how you're going to pay for it.
Immigration.
We desperately need some immigration legislation. The president's entirely correct about the crisis at the border and the fact that our immigration laws do not allow us to deal with the crisis at the border. I would hope that finally, after years of gridlock on this, and by the way, it's important to point out that in 2009 and 2010, when the Democrats controlled the entire government, they never brought up immigration reform, never, when they owned it. It's finally time for us to step up and not only solve the crisis at the border, but do some changes in the immigration laws that are sensible.
Debt ceiling this summer?
Yes, we have to do that, and we'll tackle that at some point.
Which Democratic presidential candidate do you fear the most?
You know, I'm not going to answer that question. I'll tell you this. I think any Democrat who ultimately wins the nomination is probably going to say, oh, of course I'm a capitalist. But I think what we need to look at is what they're advocating, not what they call themselves. And any Democrat who's sympathetic to packing the Supreme Court, getting rid of the Electoral College, the Green New Deal, Medicare for all, is, in my view, taking America in the direction of socialism.
And do you think you'll be pushing another Supreme Court nominee through?
Who knows? If there's a vacancy, we will.
All right, Senator. Thanks very much for the time.
Thank you.